Welcome, everybody, to Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with...
Howard Teibel.
Very smooth, very smooth.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, you are just back from, I guess last week, you were just back from the National Association for Education Procurement, NAEP conference in Louisville, Kentucky.
It was eye-opening, Pete, and I'll tell you, that bourbon goes down really easily.
Ooh, smooth.
First time, and they had their opening event at Churchill Downs. It was really cool.
Oh,
it was very cool.
That's very classy.
I got a picture of myself standing in front of a fake horse with a top hat. I'm never going to let me sure that it gets out anywhere.
Does it have like a silk bow on it? Like they go all out with the top hats?
No, I don't know what this one had, but I did it, and it's now hidden away. Although it's probably going to show up on their website. I will let you see it at some point.
Well, we may have to put it on our website. I'm surprised you're so sheepish about this stuff. I have you holding an armadillo in San Antonio.
Yeah,
come on.
I'm not happy about that either, but that's okay.
So you did three things.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So the first thing, a pre-conference leadership forum with a whole range of different roles, people in procurement, from the procurement director. I think we may have had a CFO, and I'm not sure, but buyers and people that are managers. We probably had around 20, 25 people focusing on leadership, strategic planning, and what was the third? Oh, the decision-making model. And I'll tell you what was so inspiring for me about this, and we're recording this because I want to make this available to people, is a reminder of, what do they do with this now, right? You and I have always talked about that, is you walk away from these events, and I told them, you're going to go back to your offices, you're going to get buried by your email. What do you do? What's the first thing you do? And, what I told them was, take the decision-making model, take those 7 steps, and put it in front of your team, and take one problem, one initiative, and practice this. That's the number one thing you can do at this point to start reinforcing the value. Because too often you walk away from these conferences and you got all these wonderful notes that you've taken, and then they sit on your desk for the first week. The second week they get under a pile. The third week, and then by the 6th week you finally decide to throw away the notes because you realize you're never going to read them.
Right.
And that's unfortunate. So the thing that I know people felt that this was a practical experience because these are practical tools. So they just take that's the number one thing they can do, is take back that one sheet that shows the whole process, sit down with your team and experiment. Don't wait to take that forward. And so the pre-conference was really about not only the decision-making model, but how to think about doing your own mini strategic plan within procurement. And
let me ask you something. Can you walk me through a little bit some of the unique challenges that are faced by this body of people? What are the issues that procurement people are dealing with that you found interesting, compelling?
I'd say the number one thing is that, and this is, Dory Murner, who runs NAEP, this is her core mission, is to help with make this shift. Procurement is very much a transaction-focused business, right? We buy stuff, and we've got different mechanisms for buying stuff. Procurement now encompasses, and they've shifted from, we have an AP department and a purchasing department. So procurement is a move to saying the umbrella is procurement, which includes accounts payable, accounts receivable, and purchasing and paying for goods and services. And there's a lot of movement within procurement to attempt to say and figure out, how do we position ourselves to be recognized as a strategic partner in my institution? And the dilemma they have is that by design, they are often seen as just keeping the trains running, right?
Right.
So, can procurement be involved in revenue generation? Absolutely. Matter of fact, a woman in the program said, I need to be. We've got a P card program. We can actually grow revenue through our purchasing card. Part of what they're discovering is, and they've known for a while, is that they have difficulty making the case up the food chain about why procurement can help the institution navigate some of these really difficult challenges, mostly around financial sustainability. I actually stood in front of the group and said, listen, you are so well positioned, but you got to decide that you want to take it on to help your institution or make the case to your CFO, chief business officer, why procurement should be talked about and thought about at the cabinet level. And I think it's a new discipline for them, overarching, not always, to be able to say, all right, what is our story and how do we tell that in a strategic way? So some of the outcomes, I'm thinking about someone very in particular who said to me, or in reflection of the group, and they should all be doing this, I'm going to write a business case for our area, get my group behind this, and then share this business case for what we're doing and how it ties to the institution's strategy. I'm going to share it with my boss because my boss is on the cabinet. And if we're going to get any traction, we're going to get our work recognized so that people say, does procurement have the resources they need to be effective?
Did that surprise you? That they were struggling to tell this story effectively?
No, and I think that this is going to be this has been around as long as I can remember. It's the same kind of not having the seat at the table conversation I hear with human resources. Mm-hmm. Part of it's structural, but to be honest. Usually procurement, the highest level in procurement is the procurement director. And directors in institutions, for the most part, report to vice presidents, and it's the vice presidents that are at the level of setting the strategy, right?
Right.
So directors are in a position to have to make a strong case. Directors of HR have to make a case to their finance and administration vice presidents. This is how we're going to help reposition talent, right? This is how we're going to contribute to having a streamlined workforce so that we can more effectively address strategic goal number 3 on the strategic plan. Too often, the groups that I'm describing, HR, procurement, student affairs, are so focused, rightfully so, on getting their work done, they haven't had enough practice and time managing up. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of managing down, and it's a function of being very transaction focused. So I think this session was a reminder to everybody, you know what? We got to do a better job of telling the story up versus telling the story down.
Well, it's a great reminder that we can take ownership of our own story. We don't need to rely on directors and VPs just happening to understand what it is that we do.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I met some, I know some buyers in, the buyer role, and that the terminology is changing over time. But I think we underestimate the desire of people in the entire procurement area that they have a greater understanding of the strategy, and we need to pull them out from the day-to-day operations to find opportunities to have these broader conversations. We're not developing our people enough to have those kinds of conversations. And I'll tell you, I said that when I gave my, in a sense, at the keynote. There were 3 of us that did a 15-minute keynote in front of the whole membership, and this was setting up the communicating to make an impact. And I said, one of the things we don't do well in higher ed is we don't develop people, and that most of us have worked our way into a managerial role and have no management training, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. None. And the dilemma with that is, we don't have the ability to, or we haven't developed that skill set that I think when you get really good management training to both manage up as well as manage down. And I'll tell you, lots of people are nodding their heads. Everybody, I would say the majority of people in that room are getting to the next level in their career in higher ed because they take initiative, because they're good communicators, and because they've learned on their own how to excel. As opposed to the institution really making a concerted effort to raise the bar by providing the kind of training that's needed. This is why, by the way, more people are coming in from the corporate space into higher ed, because they do have that training, right?
Yeah.
They're bringing in people who have the skills, but they have a different challenge, right? Some of them opt out because they realize within the first couple of months, my God, the pace of change or trying to get things done is so much harder in a higher ed environment than it is in a corporate environment. Just the need to get collaboration and agreement. So there's a different challenge for people coming in from the for-profit world. So the pre-conference workshop was fantastic. I think there were some key takeaways. My number one reminder to anyone listening to this is go back and apply some of the things right away. Don't wait. Just pick one thing. I had them write down 2 things that they're going to do when they get back, and I'm sure some of them will do it. At the keynote, we then went into the breakout rooms, and I probably had around 100 people in that session, and that was fantastic. And that was all about the need to, and this is a great reminder for people, how communication is at the heart of being an effective influencer. And I was saying to the group, I started my session, the 15 minutes, and I said, raise your hand if you're a leader.
And how many people?
Actually, I started my session because I'm competing with the other 2, right?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. That's a fascinating kind of setup, the way they did that. Yeah.
No, so right. So I'm going third, right?
Okay.
So they already decide that they love the first 2 guys.
Of course.
And the first 2 guys were great.
They're very
first
charming.
guy, David, came up there and he was talking about negotiations. Fantastic. Patrick gets there. He talks about social media. They got each of their 15 minutes. So now I got to go up there. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I got.
You are officially chopped liver at this point.
You got it. So I got up there and I said, listen, you just heard 2 great presentations with great content. So my pitch is very simple. 2 words: free beer. Thank you very much.
and procurement people.
Yeah, and then someone told me I made a big mistake there. I should have said free bourbon. So then
duly noted. Yeah.
Right. So the message to them when I asked them to raise their hand if you're a leader, was that my view of leadership, and I think that this is reflected in a lot of view around leadership, because I read a quote from Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and a number of other thought leaders and people that have written on leadership is about influence. And influence is not about authority, right? The classic book, Influence, Not Authority. And when I defined leadership as influence, and then I said, listen, let's do this again now. Raise your hand again if you're a leader. More hands went up. And I said, to be a good influencer, a great influencer, it's all about being an effective communicator. And then I gave them the 3 things that you have to do to be an effective communicator. You have to have a key message. You have to tailor it to a particular audience. And third, you have to find ways to engage people so that they lean in, right? Mm-hmm. That you get them to be actively listening. And I sort of deconstructed that. And then we had an hour and a half to talk about that. And people were soaking it up. Because I think that at least the people, you're speaking to the choir, because if they show up at your session, they really want that content, right? They, I think everybody in the room recognized that each one of them are at a different point in their communication skills. And the message that I'm getting more and more comfortable saying that I think resonates is more and more people in higher ed, independent schools, need to be willing to take a risk, right? Need to be willing to say the risky thing. Right? You and I have talked for years about this idea of speaking truth to power.
Absolutely.
That's really hard if you're internal. But if you are a buyer in procurement and you have an idea for a change, a way you could do the business better, you can wait for the director to tell you we're going to be doing this, or you can write the business plan, right, on 2 pages and say, this is what we should be doing, and you put it in front of them. Mm-hmm. And that is the difference between somebody who's going to excel in their career and people they're just working to get a paycheck.
Right.
Right. So it was great. That's the wonderful thing about association conferences is by default, the people who show up are the people who want to grow in their own profession. That's
wonderful. It sounds like an absolutely wonderful event with a group that it's sort of a vector of a group that you deal with often. I think it sounds like you've learned, you walked away with some new lessons as well.
Absolutely. And it reinforced for me what are the important things to talk about and what are the important things to remind people about. The last thing I'll say here is, when I get on a roll and I'm talking, all of a sudden I'll hear myself going, you know what? I am not saying anything that's like rocket science. Right. And for the most part, it's common sense. But my most recent awareness about common sense is common sense flies out the window when 2 things happen. We're over busy and we're stressed.
Yes.
And I think that's what most of us are falling into is we don't use common sense about those really simple strategies because we're over busy and we're stressed. And I think that's a really important reminder for people to say, you know what, let me take a break, step back, and say, think longer term, right? You got to have the 2 conversations. What am I doing short term, to get my work done? And also, you need to have a longer term strategy for yourself. And I took away from that group that the majority of people I interacted with have that point of view, and it was very exciting.
Oh, it's very refreshing. I think these talks are getting more and more interesting as you continue to expand your audience. Looking forward to the next one.
That's because of you. It's not because of me. That's what's making it more interesting.
I'm just a stuffed shirt, Howard.
Whenever I talk to people, no, I'm sorry. The people talk. Who is that guy? Everyone wants to know who is that guy. So it's sort of like the guy behind the curtain.
I'm Batman. Hey, this has been great fun. Folks, I'll tell you what, you should head over to iTunes and search for Navigating Change right there. You can subscribe to the show for free, and you can get this kind of greatness every single week and never miss a beat. How's that? It's cheap at twice the price. You can also join us in the conversation. You can find Howard at Howard Teibel on Twitter and me at Pete Wright. We'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for topics that are important to you, we would love to bat them about on this very show. So please reach out. On behalf of Howard Teibel, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Pete.
I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next week on Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc.